36 years of basketball knowledge and life skills. Your host, Coach Goins, focuses on today's topics on and off the court, helping players and coaches achieve their goals. So get ready for another fast break episode of Basketball More Than a Game with your host, Coach Goins.
Hey, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's that time of week, yes, for our Sunday conversation. So like we always say, make sure you got your sneakers on, you got them laced up tight, because today via telephone we have a great human being, an outstanding man, father, husband, but we're not going to let the cat out of the bag quite yet before we get in that. But before we do, I got to make sure that we pay the bills that keeps us on the air. So we want to thank our title sponsor once again, none other than Mr. Curtis Jackson, your independent broker agent and benefits coordinator. So if you're for your insurance needs in North Carolina and now serving Southern Virginia, please reach out to Mr. Curtis Jackson, area code 919-614-5796. And we just want to thank him and his staff for his continued support of Basketball More Than the Game. So you say, Coach Goins, man, what's popping? Listen, I'm so glad to be back in the great Commonwealth of Virginia. Been on the road. Had to shoot back to North Carolina. Unfortunately, had to go down to Coach Capel's funeral. Saw a lot of great guys, but again, Coach, we just thank you, and this show is definitely dedicated to Coach Capel and his family. So without further ado, we want to welcome, I tell you what, it is, how do I put this into words, but besides just going ahead and saying what's on my heart, a true friend in every sense of the word, a man that I've always looked up to, somebody that I've always been able to confide in my entire life, but none other than Mr. Eric Saunders from Southern Pines, North Carolina. Eric, we'd like to welcome you to Basketball More Than the Game.
Coach, it's wonderful to be on with you, and it's just as much of an honor for you to have me. I really appreciate it.
You know what, folks? You go through life and you learn and you meet people and as the old saying goes, sometimes you don't miss your well until you don't miss the water until your well runs dry. As we go through life, and that's what we're going to be talking about today in today's episode, as we get to, for you all to know who this kind gentleman on the show is. But his mother and father, they were great friends of my mother and father and my aunts and uncles, and we grew up in a great town of Southern Pines, North Carolina. We're going to talk about that a little bit, but more importantly, we just want to, before we actually get into the podcast, we want to thank our continued supporters all around the country. We've only got about 5 states to go, and then we'll be in every state in the U.S., and we just picked up another country on our international scene, and that was Ghana, Africa. So we want to thank all of our listeners and subscribers from Australia, Japan, United Arab Emirates, United Kingdom, Finland, Germany, Netherlands, Canada, Dominican Republic, New Zealand, Albania, Germany, Ireland, Kuwait, Tunisia, and Vietnam. And now we want to thank and welcome Ghana, Africa. So, Eric, we are worldwide, and we're, of course, taking care of business here in the U.S. But, folks, what we're going to talk about today in our fast break session is just, the game of basketball. And the person that we have on now is somebody that, has taught me a lot about the game of basketball and was able to, we barnstormed, we did a lot of great things as it relates to basketball. But, Eric, I want you, and I'm going to turn the mic over to you. If you don't mind, if you'll tell the listeners, how how did you learn about the game of basketball? How did you develop into the great player that you became, and just, what basketball has done for you in your life?
I had a couple of mentors. I've been playing since I was about 5 years old. But my uncle, my mom's youngest brother, he taught me the real fundamentals of the game and taught me how to be tough. And then another friend of ours, my parents, and I think your parents knew him as well, Jake Lloyd. He actually taught me how to shoot. And from then on, I just loved the game. Every chance I got, I was out there shooting and practicing and doing what it took to be good. I guess I was a little okay. And then I had some other mentors, people that I looked up to who had great games. Henry Douglas Sr., Darius McLaughlin, Philip Hancock, Coach Capel, tried to make my game and combine my game and get a little bit from all of them. Henry Douglas and Darius McLaughlin were just great shooters, and they could put the ball in the basket. Philip Hancock was he was a great defensive player, and I knew a lot of times that would be my avenue to get in and play for whatever team I was playing on. Is being a stopper and playing defense. And then Coach Capel, actually, who I still consider to be the greatest passer that I've ever seen, growing up in Southern Pines the way that we did.
Yes, sir. And folks, here's the thing that's so special that Mr. Saunders is calling out, and those are legends. Anybody, as I sat here and he was calling names out, and some of those guys were older than I. Well, they are, all of them are older than I am, but just being able to be the young guy on the block and again, hanging out with the likes of Eric Saunders and learning the game and understanding the game. And that's what was so important. And I think the one thing I want to capsulize what Eric was talking about was just, how he learned. And I think that a lot of times, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Eric, jump in at any time, is I think that's the lost art of the game today. A lot of young players, don't sit down and go under the tutelage, if you will. They don't go under, I don't want to say the knife, but they don't go under the microscope and really sit down or go to the gym and watch older guys play and learn from that. I mean, the guys that you called out, they were just absolutely legends. And that's what basketball, that's what this show is about, talking about basketball, talking about life. And I'm telling you about what I know, from a young man that came up in Southern Pines and I couldn't score 25 points in the closet by myself. These guys allowed me to be a part of something special and just be able to be a friend. But what Eric is showing and telling everybody today is he tapped his game and he looked at these guys and was able to, to call that out. So out of the guys that you call, most of those gentlemen were guards. Am I correct?
Correct.
Okay, so pound for pound, if you had, and I'm going to put you on the spot here, if you had to select two guards that you just mentioned, who do you think were the best two guards in your opinion?
Darius McLaughlin. Well, my favorite backcourt from watching people play from when we grew up in Southern Pines was always Darius and Philip.
Okay.
They are the two people that I really tried to emulate the most and incorporate what they did in my game. But what separated Darius to me from everybody else was he was such a magnificent shooter. And he could shoot it deep. I shot okay. My strength was going to the basket. But just combining what they did on the court. Darius on the offensive end and then Philip on the defensive end. But again, like I said, I made my name, getting people the ball. And again, I think back to Coach Capel. He was always such a great passer, and he knew what to do and how to direct things on the court. And he could get a little exotic, on the fast break. And he's the first person I ever saw that came down and just threw the ball between his legs, and the guy trailing and picked it up, laid it in, or did whatever he needed to do. But the two, in my view, the two greatest guards to come from where we're from were Darius McLaughlin and Philip Hancock.
How about that? So, ladies and gentlemen, you just heard it from none other than Mr. Eric Saunders laying down the law. That's exactly what we're going to call it. Because again, I only had the chance to see the late Darius McLaughlin, play in years and years after he was at his all-time premium. But take it from Mr. Eric Saunders. If he tells you that was the best backcourt tandem in Southern Pines, that was the best backcourt tandem in Southern Pines. So let's talk about this. So you played since you were 5, and then all of a sudden you break into Pinecrest, and you guys and correct me if I'm wrong, you guys were the first class that played at the James Moore Gymnasium. Am I correct?
You're correct. In fact, the first game we played at the gym on campus was Scotland High School, and we lost that game. The only game that I'd ever fouled out of at any level. But it was great. It was new, and that rubberized floor, and of course Pinecrest always got a lot of great support. So the gym was packed. It was a great place to play in. At first, at least for me, it wasn't a great place to shoot in. But as you took some time and adjusted to it, it became better.
You know what?
But we were the first team to ever play in the James Moore Gymnasium.
And that was 1976, folks. So let me just kind of frame this out real quick for him there, Mr. Saunders. What Mr. Saunders has referenced to, how the gym was made. It was kind of unique how that gym was designed, because you came in and you actually crossed. When you came in from you paid your money to get in the gym. When you came into the gym, you actually walked across a basketball court that was running basically east to west.
Correct.
So you walked in, you crossed a full court east to west gym floor before you actually got to the bleachers. So I know when Coach Capel was my head coach, when I was student assistant from 81 to 84, his number one goal was to make sure that you put the opposing team to we call it the open end, because it was such a dynamic when you go up and you shoot, and it was no wall. So imagine, you go in there for a layup, and it was a depth perception issue. Sure. that we always face. So we would always, first half, we'd always want to go and put our opponent to the open end, because we were so, and as Eric was framing it out, we were used to playing on that court. We used to being in that environment, but opposing teams always struggled because we always referred to that as the open end. And he said, actually, I think it's the only rubberized floor that I've ever seen. That's the only rubberized floor that we ever played on. But when you come to Pinecrest, you were in for a treat, because it was always wall to wall. We'd always had I think it was Henry McNeil who used to do he'd do the starting lineups, and he'd be out on the court and he'd be dragging that long mic. We didn't have cordless mics back then. You had to have it plugged into the deck.
That's exactly right.
And he'd be out there and he'd have his shirt and tie and blazer on, and he'd be making an announcement and introducing. But, growing up in Southern Pines, it was just a great environment, and kind of want to shift that way a little bit there, Eric, and just talk. If you don't mind, share with the listeners, what Southern Pines meant to you, the people that you knew, the environment growing up, and just being able to, what we did, growing up in such a great town.
Coach, you're right. It was when we were growing up, it was a good atmosphere. It was a family town. You had your parents, but then you had individuals in the neighborhood too who were just as much your parents. They looked out for you. You couldn't really get away with very much because everybody knew everybody.
That's right.
And it was just it was a blossoming town, and it was a great atmosphere to grow up in. I really enjoyed living in Southern Pines, and you and I and some other of our friends and contemporaries, we hung out and we had some good times. Just doing stuff if you will. We just had a good time just hanging out.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So listen, you young guys that's down into this episode, here's our challenge to you. Know what? Our highlight would be, and it just and Eric is right. I mean, you could come to Southern Pines and like you said, we call it riding the route. We had a route, and it was almost if we worked for Amazon now or the Postal Service or UPS, we'd probably be retired because we put some miles on those cars riding the route, and we could you could go, and Southern Pines was so great. When you turned the block, you could name after name after name, and who lived in house after street after street after street. That was just the environment that we grew up in. And Eric's exactly right. I mean, you could go out and you could hang. You knew not to get in no trouble because, as he framed it out, everywhere you stopped, somebody knew you. If they didn't know Lamont Goins, they knew Eric Saunders. And so therefore, we had to walk that fine line. Again, we had a great time and just barnstorming. I want to talk a little bit about that. These guys, like I said earlier, I couldn't score 25 points in the closet by myself, but these guys allowed me to be a part of something special that I still cherish today. We were playing with a couple of guys out of Scotland County. And the name of our team was L.A. And we always wore kind of a weird color, T-shirt. And one of the ones that really stood out in my mind was the blue one. I would call almost like a teal with the kind of gold, and it had L.A. and the L.A. stood for basically the Laurinburg area.
That's right.
And it was just guys from Southern Pines, Scotland County, and we would barnstorm. I mean, we would load up and we'd go to games. And one of the tournaments that really stands out in my mind, and jump in here, Eric, is when we were playing in Clio, South Carolina.
Oh man!
So
that was great. We, of course, we were with the Laurinburg area team. Everybody else was from South Carolina, and we just kind of dominated that league until the championship game, and then everything just kind of fell apart. But not because of what we did or didn't do. It was just it was a hometown thing, but those cats could really play. But we had some great guys that played with us as well.
That's so true.
Man, who I keep coming back to is Bruce Reeves. To me, as far as big men went, I still think he's the best big man in that area, Southern Pines, Aberdeen, where we grew up at. In my mind, he's still the best big man that I ever played with or that I ever saw.
Right.
And that's kind of some high praise. You think back to, you were a little bit younger, but I was just a little bit older and could see, you go back to the very early 70s when Pinecrest first opened. You had Charles Waddell and Dexter Pride and all those guys from over in Taylortown and Eastwood, like Tony and Otis Thompson, Eddie Utley. You had all of those. I mean, they were big men, 6'5", 6'6", 6'7". But for me, Bruce was better than all of them.
Right.
He could jump. He could shoot it. He could handle. He wasn't selfish, but you wanted him to have the ball all the time. So that's what I did when we played together. Okay, I'm getting it to Bruce.
Right.
And but he was selfish. He was unselfish. He didn't take all the shots. If you were open, he passed you the ball, and he did his thing all around. He probably was the best big man from that area that I've ever seen or played with.
You know what, and folks, in my playing time, and again, these guys allowed me to be a part of something special. And for you young guys, I mean, think about what Mr. Saunders just framed out for you. Just like he said, he knew who the best player was, and he wanted, as a guard and a true point guard, that Mr. Saunders was. He wanted, Bruce to have the ball because he knew he was the best player on the floor, but being unselfish. Bruce Reeves, who nickname was 6'5", and they said, why'd you call him 6'5"? Because that's how tall he was.
How tall he was.
And so and that was just Southern Pines. I mean, they gonna put a nickname on you,
and it will last you for a
lifetime. Exactly. So then, and as I told my son, and when I introduced him to Bruce Reeves, who we call 6'5", I said, this is 6'5". I said, but once you really know him well, you don't call him 6'5", you just call him 6.
Yeah.
So we cut the 6'5" down just to 6. But you think about what Mr. Saunders is framing out there for you young guys and you young and as well as your coaches is understanding that you have the number one player on the floor and your team recognizes that, but also that number one player recognizes it's not all about him. So that's a great coaching call out, and I appreciate Mr. Saunders bringing that out on the show, because that it is so important that we realize that every team has the best player, but the best player can't do it all. Because if he goes out and he has a bad game and everybody else, and then he pulls everybody else down, you may come up on the short end of the stick. But, going back to what he was saying in the twilight of Bruce's career when we were barnstorming, and when Eric calls this out, I can remember we coming down and he could give Bruce the entry pass into a lane, and there was nobody smoother going to the left side. He'd catch it and he could roll to that basket.
Mm-hmm.
And it was if it wasn't a deuce, he was going to the line.
Right.
And shooting free throws. But his ball handling skills for a big man around the paint was just absolute. It was an enjoyable thing to watch. Him with the basketball in his hands, doing the things that he did. But I just also want to recognize a couple other guys that we used to kind of barnstorm around a little bit. On that, I think a lot about Ray Thomas, nicknamed Sherlock. He had some of the biggest hands I'd ever seen, and he could shoot, but he actually shot better when somebody was on him. On him.
That was the strangest thing, Coach.
Go ahead.
Saw, you felt safer if you didn't guard it. You didn't need to be in it, but if you were in his face, oh man.
Oh yeah.
That was murder. I never seen anything like it. He shot better with people in his face than he did when he was wide open.
Yep. And I don't know if it was, and that's the truth. So you're hearing it from the guest, Mr. Eric Saunders, and you're hearing it from Coach Goins, live on the show. That this man, back when we played, he actually shot better when somebody was guarding him than he did when he was by himself. But it was such, and I don't want to start dropping names, and because I don't want to leave somebody out, But there was so many guys that we would just load up. And we had a great time, great relationship. And here's the thing that was when I look back on it now, I just turned 51 last week, and I stop and I think about that thing, and I was like, man, he was grown men, most of them had families, and we could roll out and we could play ball, and there was never any argument, never any backbiting, never any man, I don't understand. I mean, we just would roll in the gym and take care of business. And I go back to, I'll never forget when we were playing in Cloud, South Carolina. We came in and we were sitting down in the gym together, and I heard somebody say, "Hey, that's the boy from Southern Pines. All of them can shoot it." I don't know if you remember that, but I remember walking in the gym and sitting there because a game was going on, and I don't know if we were up next, but we were playing that day. And we sat down, and somebody said, "That's them boys from Southern Pine." They said, "All of them can shoot it." And
but you're right, and they did that because the guys from down there in Clio, the brothers Greg and Anthony,
right?
They played in the league in the rec league that we had in Southern Pine, so they knew what we could do, and. It was a chore with some of the people that we had on some of those barnstorming teams. It was a chore for people to beat us. We had some really dynamic people that we played with. And I'm like you don't want to miss, drop too many names because you might miss somebody. But I'm gonna throw a name at you also from a person closer to your age and from your era that I enjoyed playing with. Godfrey Wilson.
Right. Oh yeah. Woo.
Godfrey could shoot it, but he could handle it. He had the best handle of anybody I ever saw around Southern Pines. But sometimes with playing with him, he would just kind of back up a bit and maybe defer to me. And I told him, I said, look, I'm running this thing. When I give it to you, I want you to shoot it.
Right.
That's why I'm passing it to you. You can shoot. So don't pass it back. I'll do what I need to do. What I need for you to do is when I throw it to you, you put it in the basket.
How about that?
But he really could play. But that was the thing about Southern Pines, though. If you go from the era that I mentioned and talked about, that I know the best, from the late 70s all the way through to the late 80s, we had some great guards run through Southern Pines.
Yes, you did.
Had some great big people too. What was unique about the big people in that area is that they could all shoot. They were beautiful jump shooters. Like I said, people like Bruce Reeves, who, like I said, I think he's the best all-around big man that I've seen come out of Southern Pines. His older brother, Walter, was a great shooter. Left-handed, shot it from the corner. To me, he wasn't as athletic as Bruce, but he could shoot it. The person that I thought had the most beautiful jump shot was Ricky Golston.
Okay.
It was just beautiful. Sitting in the corner, and he just turned it loose. It was picture perfect. I mean, like the night that he scored, which is still the school record at Pinecrest.
Yes,
where
it
he
is.
scored 50 points down at 71st.
50 points. You know, and I had the opportunity to see Rick last weekend when I was at Coach Capel's funeral.
Right.
And he still looks well, and that's the first thing I thought about when I saw him. I was like, I said, man, Rick. And again, your mind just runs to, he still holds, and I don't think it'll ever be broken. I really don't.
Right.
Because you look at the players that played since when he set the record, and then you look at the players that played since then. I don't, it will be a long, long time before you get anybody to come through Pinecrest. Just like you said, from the 80s, basically you go from, I'm going to call it from the 69 when the school first opened, all the way up to the mid 80s. I'm going to say the last dominating class was probably class of 87, which was Antonio Johnson.
Yeah, 86, I think.
Yeah, 86. Okay, yeah, 80, that's right, because I was 84, right? The class of 86.
So that was Antonio Johnson. That was Ken Spencer.
Right. And that's the thing. And I'm going. I'm glad you called those names. I'm going to call this out. And that's one of the things that I learned from Coach Capel was, he had two sophomores on that team, which was Ken and Antonio.
Right.
And his philosophy was, if I have sophomores on the varsity, they will be starting.
Right.
Or they don't come up. And here's the thing I want to call out to all the coaches, and again, I'm not stepping on anybody's toes because, am I guilty of drinking the Coach Capel Kool-Aid? Yeah, I am, because that's who taught me basketball. That's who I was around the most. And when I saw that, and then you fast forward it, those guys were sophomores, and you fast forward it to their seniors. One went to Wake Forest University on a full-year basketball scholarship, and the other one went to Pembroke, University of North Carolina at Pembroke on a 4-year scholarship. So that's my stone, that's my anchor, that's my foundation to be able to say, if they're a sophomore and they're on the varsity, they will be starting because they're that good. And then you fast forward it, and then you land it, and then now next thing you know, hey, here's two guys that went on to play college basketball, and that played at Pinecrest as sophomores. So you know what, it's so good, and I'm enjoying this. But Eric, let me take it. I got to drop in a quick commercial. and just wanted to give a shout out to AC Sports. For those of you that don't know AC Sports, that is our sports program here in Augusta County. And again, go to playacsports.com. We are right in the middle of, we just cranked up basketball. So happy. We actually broke a record. We're up 60%. So we've got about 141 kids in our rec program, and goes from age 6 to 15. And right now we're looking at about 8 or 9 travel teams. So our plate is definitely full, but we just want to thank our continued supporters of AC Sports, and just for your recreation needs, please visit playacsports.com. Again, right after we finish up basketball, they'll be going back into volleyball. We did baseball. We have track and field, flag football, volleyball for girls, and then hopefully next year we'll get in. We'll start up a little bit of wrestling, but we're staying pretty busy. But I just want to make sure that we get them the advertisement that they need, and we appreciate their continued support. So, hey, Eric, as we start transitioning back into, I want to kind of shift into when we used to hit some ball games. And folks, when I say this, my mind ran back the other day, and of course, as I'm sitting in the service, Coach Capel, things just come up, that, and when you're going through that kind of stuff, and for me personally, that's, my mind runs back, and there were so many times that Mr. Saunders and I would jump in the car, and wherever Fayetteville State was playing, that's where we would be. Whether if it was in Cumberland County, if it was in Durham, we'd be headed to either see Central and Fayetteville State play, and we'd stop by Mr. Allen's store and either get a fish sandwich or a pork chop sandwich for the road, and we would put it in the wind.
Oh man!
And go to those games, and there you just don't realize, man, how many times and my mind was running back, last weekend with all of that stuff. But if you don't mind, just kind of share your experience, and as we were kind of doing a little bit of not playing, but just going to ball games.
Oh man, that was a treat. You and I would touch bases, and okay, well, where's Fayetteville State playing at? And of course, they didn't have their facility on campus when we were going to watch them play. When Coach Capel was the coach, we go to the old Cumberland County Arena, and of course, at that time, Coach had Darrell Armstrong on that team, and Sherman Pride, and it's just like you said, wherever Fayetteville State was at and playing, we went. We went to our fair share of games. It was a blast. They had some talented teams too, but I go back to something that you said earlier, a comment that you made about are you drinking the Coach Capel Kool-Aid? Well, I feel like I've drunk it too. He never coached me, but that's probably my one regret as a ball player, and especially as a ball player coming through Pinecrest. Maybe not having him coach me. He was a smart guy, a good strategist. He was well connected. Even folks in the area, he knew who the players were.
Exactly.
Even people, when he was coaching at Pinecrest, by the time he started, obviously I had been out of school for several years by then, but even people in the street, he knew who the ball players were. He was probably as good a judge of talent from where we're from as I probably have ever seen. So I'm a little like you. I'm drinking the Kool-Aid a bit of Coach Capel myself.
You know what? That's exactly right. I mean, just when having an opportunity to hit those games, and I had the opportunity to talk to and see Darrell last weekend. I had think about he was a rookie in the NBA when he was 26 years old.
Right.
And then he finished, I think he played, 10, 11 years for the Orlando Magic and finishing with the Dallas Mavericks. Orlando Magic, now he's with the Dallas Mavericks. And he's been coaching in the NBA for almost 10, 11 years. So what a great, great career. He took the service very hard when we were all down. And, my mind was, going out and touching base, and just, things like that, and that's what life is about, and that's why basketball. That's why the title of our show, Basketball More Than the Game. Everything that Eric and I did, going up and down, shooting some gas in the car and jumping and barnstorming and playing ball and then going to basketball games. That was just a great time in my life, and it was a great, and there was nothing, and there was nobody I'd rather do that with than my great friend Eric Saunders. And as we travel around, and folks, and what I'm telling you young guys is guys that you play with, you need to make sure you keep that relationship going, keep it open, and be able to have that dialogue, because when you become, like me, I just turned 51 last Sunday, and as I sit around and my mom's up visiting, and then she says, you'll be what? And I say, Mom, I'm 51. I mean, she says, you what? Wait a minute, you how old? I said, Mom, I'm 51. And that's the, and that's the thing that, when you stop and you look, and just grateful to see it, and to find people, that we grew up with in Southern Pines, and the coaches that we were, and I'll put it this way, we were very, very blessed to grow up in the area that we grew up, and go to the school that we went to, and have the connections that we did on the court as well as off the court, and that's what makes it so special. And then when you get notes, just like I got a note from Eric the other day, and just telling me about he was listening to the show and how much he enjoyed it, and that's when all of a sudden I had an aha moment, and I'm like, how can I do this, and how can I have this show and not reach back and have one of the main guys that's been so instrumental in the development of so many guys coming behind him. And that's the thing that that I love about this guy is, no matter, like I said, you couldn't score 25 in the closet, but these guys allowed me to be a part of something special. To go to the park on Sunday, and I'll capture this and I'll toss it back to Eric. In our hometown, we had a park, Southern Pines Park, which was right next to the police station. On Sunday, you would turn that corner, and it was as if Michael Jordan was playing LeBron. There'd be that many people out there, but that's what we did. Now when you ride through townships, you don't see that anymore. And that was the Mecca. And I can remember, I turned that corner and I'd be looking. Now your car, you had a blue. What was the make of your car? It was.
What was I driving then?
Because I know you had your gray the Peugeot, but you very seldom drove that to the park. You always would drive your I call it your runabout car.
Oh, okay, the blue bomber.
Yes,
yeah.
sir.
My Buick.
Your Buick.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Folks,
Yes, sir.
he'd come down. He'd be coming down Pennsylvania Avenue, window down, and his arm. He always drove with his arm out the window.
Wow. You remember that?
Oh yeah, because if I was coming one way, you going down there, I could tell. So here comes Eric, because he'd come down and have his arm. He'd have his arm hanging out the window, not on the windowsill, but it was out the window, down beside the driver's door, and he'd blow and he'd wave, or we'd pull over or do whatever we have to do. But it was always great to see him, no matter whether I was home for the holidays or whether I was again. It's just there's no place like your hometown, growing up and meeting great people like this. I'll toss this out, and then I'm gonna kick it over to Mr. Saunders for as we start wrapping this thing out. And I'm just gonna share this with you folks. And there's always times in your life that you as a young person and you make you make moves and you make positions and you do things. And one of the first times I bought a brand new car, first time I'd ever bought a brand new car, and I was so excited, man. And I get this car, and Eric and I had been talking about it, and I think we had even driven up on the lot a couple of times and taking a look at this car. I said, man, I really like to have this car. So I went on and pulled the trigger, and I want you to know the first place I rolled up to was my friend Eric Saunders' house. I knocked on the door, and I never forget. He came to the door. He said, man, what are you doing at home? down during the week. I said, man, take a look out in the yard. And next thing I know, we rolling down the. I said, man, go and get up under the wheel. And he took that thing for a spin, and we were coming down through on the route, as we call it, and we ran another one of our buddies, Tyrone Wallace, and he knew as soon as he seen that car coming through, he knew who it was. But and those are the things. I just want to frame that out, Eric. That was
man. I remember that, Lamont, because I'm thinking to myself, okay, at the time you were living in Waysboro.
Yes, sir.
You're a probation officer, and now you came home every weekend, or if we had something going on, where we were playing in a league or barnstorming or something, you shoot in like that. But I'm thinking, man, this is the middle of the week. What is Lamont doing here? And you bought that car. Oh man, if that car could talk.
If that car could talk.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, man.
We had a lot of good times and took a lot of good trips in that car. So.
Yes, sir. Yes, we did. Yes, we did, man. So listen, hey, folks, you know what? I just want to go ahead and start to wrap up on this thing. And first of all, Eric, I just want to again just thank you for who you are. Every step of the way, you've always walked with integrity. You've always been a man's man, and you're a dynamite father, outstanding husband, and just a true leader in every sense of the word, and a true friend of not just Lamont Goins, but a true friend of everybody that comes in contact with. A lot of people go through life, and a lot of people can say this and say this about this person, but you will never ever talk to anybody that doesn't hold Eric Saunders in high regard. And I certainly appreciate your time and your talent, and again, your friendship. So with that, I'm going to toss it over to you, Eric. So for your closing comments, anything that's on your heart, you have the mic.
Well, Coach, I'll be honest with you. I appreciate everything that you said. I just try to be me, and that's all I've ever been really good at. So I figure why mess with something that's not broken? But I could say the same about you. You've always been a faithful person, a true friend. You never forget me, and that means a lot. Going through life, and then especially seeing you grow as a young man, and with your family and everything that you've done and pursued. I may not have had a big part in it, but I just feel honored that you continue to share your life and your experiences with me when you really didn't have to, and where, in my view, sometimes I'm not really worthy of that. But I thank you. No, I thank you for just being my friend.
You know what, and that's what it's about, folks, and that's the title of the show. Basketball is more than the game, and when you realize it's more than the game, you'll get the true understanding, and you understand why we do what we do. As I say, we're on the grind. So when I'm out, and I appreciate those words from my friend Eric Saunders. Folks, when he says that, think about when I'm out and have an opportunity to go to this ball game, that ball game, I may be there, but my guys are there with me in spirit, because as I travel, I try to bring this stuff back. I try to expose as many people around this stuff. That's why we do this podcast. That's why the podcast is free. This show will air this coming Sunday. It'll be up on the YouTube channel so people can tie in, and not just, it's a conversation. It's not an interview. It's two old friends sitting down talking about how the game of basketball has blessed them as we continue to go down through this life. So on behalf of my great friend, Mr. Eric Saunders from Southern Pines, originally from Southern Pines, now living in the capital city of Raleigh, North Carolina, and from your host, Coach Goins, as we always say, I'll close it at our scripture verse, John 14:6, I'm the way, the truth, and the life.